Okay, so I think we can go ahead and get started. Once again, I'd like to thank everybody for joining us. Julia here from Inspira Advantage. We're an admissions consulting company dedicated to helping deserving students get into the medical school of their dreams. Really excited you could all join us here today for a really exciting webinar all about starting your med school personal statement. We have a really awesome webinar lined up for you guys. I'll just go over what we're talking about. But first, before I jump into that, just a couple of housekeeping things before we get started. We're going to have a designated Q&A session, as you can see is the last kind of agenda item here. So if you guys have any questions throughout the course of the webinar, I'd ask that you hang on to them and type them in the Q&A chat box. Even if you have it throughout the webinar or you want to save it till the end of the webinar, whatever works, just enter it in the chat box and then our two panelists will answer it then. I also want to flag that this webinar will be sent out afterwards tomorrow. It'll be sent out tomorrow. So if you want to go ahead and review one more time or you kind of keep this for your records, we'll be sending it out to all attendees tomorrow. So stay tuned for that. Just to go over what we are going to be talking about today, of course, we'll be doing our introductions and I'll allow our two panelists to introduce themselves to you. We'll be talking about understanding the med school personal statement and what you can expect, common pitfalls to avoid, brainstorming exercises for the personal statement, tips for selecting your most meaningful experiences, and then crafting an impactful narrative for your personal statement. And then we'll dive into strategies for ensuring your narrative is impactful and compelling. And then, as I mentioned, we'll have that Q&A session where we'll be answering all the questions that you may have. All right, so without further ado, I'll give it away to our two panelists to introduce themselves. If you guys want to go ahead.
Hey, everyone. Thanks for joining us. Can everyone hear me? Can you hear me? Yeah. Hey, I'm Ben. I'm currently a resident physician at Vandy. I did my med school at Vanderbilt as well. I'm doing nuclear and diagnostic radiology. Thanks for joining us.
Hi, thank you for joining us. My name is Jess. I'm also a resident physician. I'm an intern, so first year. I'm at University of California, San Diego, and I'm doing my residency in psychiatry.
Awesome. Thanks so much, guys. All right, so let's get started and talk about understanding the med school personal statement.
Yeah, so, the personal statement, you guys are probably already aware of this, but this is just one component of the AMCAS app. In addition to your work and activities, your course requirements, your letter of recs. It's kind of unique in that it's kind of a major portion where you describe your own narrative. It's about a page long, 5,300 characters. And yeah, this it's important to note that or I guess Jess will kind of explain what it's for, but it's important that you will have to do this at every stage of your medical training, from applying to medical school, applying to residency, as well as fellowship.
Yeah. So what is the purpose of a personal statement? So the personal statement is a unique part of the application process, and personally, it was my favorite. This is because it's an opportunity to show the admissions committee, anyone that's reading, more than just what's on your resume or just the skills you have, the experiences you've done, the classes you've done, your MCAT score. It's about actually showing like who you are to them. And it's one of the only things that you can kind of control and frame in such a way that makes you, depicts you how you want to be depicted and shows them how you think about yourself and what strengths you have that will make you a strong doctor. Like this says, it's a platform to express intentions, experiences, and what qualities you think will allow you to do this.
Okay, and now that we've kind of touched on that, what are some common pitfalls to avoid?
Yeah, so some common pitfalls, and I'll add my own on top of these as well, is one, overemphasizing achievements. So, other aspects of your application are where you can kind of state your achievements, but the personal statement is kind of where you show, not tell, what you did with those experiences. And that ties into the second point, which is reflecting. You need to make sure that you're, really fleshing out these experiences and explaining what you learned from them and how it contributed to kind of where you are now. And 3, generic language. So this is, like I said previously, is kind of a unique space where you create your own narrative. And with that, you can showcase your writing skills. It's important to be a good writer in medicine. So avoiding generic language and really showcasing your concise but high quality writing, which is important. As this is also important for kind of the academic side of medicine as well, because I'm sure many of you are already doing research, but we'll be doing research in residency as well. And four, of course, with anything in AMCAS in your application, you have to follow instructions. Some additional pitfalls I'd say is avoiding cliches. There's a lot of the same types of stories that these admission committees kind of see, and once they see a lot of these that aren't truly reflective, they kind of glaze over those details of your personal statement. So making sure you're not cliche is important. And I kind of talked about this previously, but making sure you're concise with your language, very kind of fluffy writing, where you're adding all these different adjectives is a common pitfall. That's not necessarily good writing. It's kind of in medicine, I think it's important to be concise. So I think that's a big pitfall as well. Making sure your admissions reviewer who's reviewing hundreds of these applications can just kind of see the main points is important. Yeah.
I can add a couple as well. I think two that are important. You probably remember when you were learning how to write like an essay, you were taught to use a hook at the beginning, and a hook can be good if used like tactfully, but something that you want to avoid is being very dramatic. Like I've seen personal statements where it begins with like, I remember as I watched the blood drip down my patient's arm. Like you don't need to say that to catch their attention. And frankly, it'll just distract, I think, from the point that you're trying to make. So I would avoid that. And then another thing that I would avoid is procrastinating, which I know is extremely difficult, especially because this is one of the things that I think people dread the most when working on their application. And so something that I tell students in order to kind of break that procrastination is to just start writing. You don't have to start with introduction and you don't have to know where you're going to go, but just to start writing. If you have like a patient story that really sticks out to you, just write the story. It doesn't have to have like a good beginning or end. Just write what you remember and how it made you feel and how that pertains to your application and you becoming a good doctor.
Thank you so much for that. We'll touch on brainstorming exercises for your personal statement next.
Yeah, so this is kind of leads into what I was, or stems well from what I was just talking about. So one good idea that you can do is like build an idea bank. So to do this, you can start early, like I was saying, like a Word document or a notebook. So like something that I would do is during my shadowing experiences, I would carry around just like a notebook. And if I had a patient, even when I was doing research, I would work with patients. And when I had a specific experience that I thought was touching or that stood out to me or that was significant, I would just write it down, even just writing down like the date and something identifier of the patient, just so that it like jogs your memory. Another thing you can kind of jot down or keep a list of are words that you want to portray and that like characteristics of yourself that you think that stand out, that make you you. So I'm a psychiatrist. One of my things that I kind of felt was a strength for me was like my ability to listen and just basically communicate with patients. So I knew those, and I actually knew that I wanted to do psychiatry when going into when applying to medical school. And so I highlighted like my communication skills and my ability to listen through stories. Remember, show, not tell. So you can jot down words that you want to kind of exemplify. And if you start doing this early and you do it with like, if you're doing research, anytime you're working with patients, so shadowing, then you'll have some stuff to go off of when you're sitting down and actually starting to write your personal statement.
So exercise 2, word association. I think a better title might be topic selection. So like Jess said, when you start thinking of these different experiences and reflecting on them, you might kind of start tying things together and developing some sort of theme. These themes are different topics, kind of the major different categories in your application as an applicant are going to be things like, research, volunteering, leadership, other extracurriculars. So you need to start thinking, once you have these different experiences, what they may fall into in terms of topics. That may kind of, basically you have research what experiences you've had, volunteering what you've done, and kind of a one-liner. So you can start jotting things down and associating different things at this point.
Yeah, another good tip when you're starting to think about what you want to add in your personal statement is to work backwards and think about what is not already there in your application. So, for example, if you don't have really good leadership experiences, then maybe your personal statement is somewhere that you want to try to pick a story that highlights your leadership skills a little bit. You want to work strategically to make sure that, because like I said at the beginning, this is like one of the only things that you really have control over when you're sitting down and like actually putting together your application. So if you're noticing that you're missing something, this is a chance to add it. And also, like kind of like I was getting at before, like you want to think about your end goal, and if that's even past, like if you already know that you're interested in a specific specialty, we can talk a little bit about later about like you want to be careful to not pigeonhole yourself, but it's a good, this personal statement is a good way to think about like if you know your goal, like what kind of things do you need to be to attain that goal, and then you describe those things and examples of how you exemplify those characteristics in your personal statement.
Yeah, and I just to add here, I think it's like she said, it's really important here to take control and think about what you want to talk about in your application that isn't fully fleshed out. There's, once you start applying or going through that MCAS application, you'll see there's not a lot of actual space to describe your different experiences. So this might be a good place for that. I remember when I wrote mine, I did a ton of research in undergrad, but I think I didn't really flesh out what that meant to me and what that journey looked like for me. So that's kind of what I did in my personal statement. I think that was very helpful.
Yeah, that was a really good point. And like along the same lines, like if you had a really impactful experience in your childhood or in any time of your life, like a personal experience that you feel comfortable sharing, those are oftentimes not anywhere else on your application. So if you have an experience that helped shape you into the person you are, and better yet, helped shape you into or gave you the impetus or the inspiration to become a doctor, and you feel comfortable sharing, I think this is a really good place to do that. With the caveat of if you put it in your personal statement, you need to be prepared to talk about it in interviews. So if it's something extremely personal that you think that you might get emotional talking about in person, I would rethink that, adding that into your personal statement.
So creating a mind map. So once you kind of have the different experiences, different topics, and that you want to include in your personal statement and the direction you want to take, it's important to start creating your flow. I think, in my opinion, this is actually the hardest part of a personal statement. Is it's easy to get your ideas at least generally on the paper, but it's really difficult to create a coherent story that ties everything together to describe, why you're going in. Ultimately, the reason, the purpose of the personal statement is to describe who you are as a person and why you're going into medicine. So kind of creating a good flow to describe all those different activities in a way that doesn't come off as kind of cliche or, just listing off your CV, like we said at the beginning with the common pitfalls is difficult. So at this point, you can try and think about how things might flow. I must have changed the flow of my personal statement, dozens of times to try and get things right in terms of where to flow naturally. So this is important to kind of start early on that.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And then I think the easiest and what I did was kind of going through chronologically. So like I had a significant experience that happened to me earlier on. I kind of said that and like how that was the impetus for me wanting to become a doctor. And then like the steps that I took to get there. And I feel like that I've seen that a lot like commonly, or like the first time that you became interested in medicine, like your first exposure to the medical field. That's like a common one too, keeping in mind that you want to avoid being cheesy. But there are a lot of other really creative ways you can go about this. I've seen people kind of just use different, like just say patient stories, just like 3 or 4, that kind of within the story show their growth, and kind of like them coming to the determination of like the kind of doctor they want to be. I've seen a lot of other really creative personal statements as well, even just zooming in on one story, and within that story using the language and like allusions to different parts of their life in order to kind of come to a conclusion that is why they would be a good doctor. So you can be creative with it. It's more daunting, but but those do stand out more. So if you have like a cool idea, it's worth exploring, I think.
And sorry, one more thing. I think you mentioned a really good point is the most common way to create that flow is chronologically. And I think that's a safe bet. I think, if you're a creative person, you're able to describe it creatively. I think that's important, but also, the basics are always good as well. I feel like one thing, and that's a common pitfall as well, is a good personal statement is helpful if it helps you stand out in a positive way. But the worst thing you can do with the personal statement is be memorable in a negative way. I think for residency especially, it's important to be like a normal personal statement. Just show you're a normal person, but don't necessarily stand out. I think.
Yeah, that's such a good point, Benjamin. Like it's better. You want to have a strong personal statement. You want it to get your point across, but it doesn't necessarily need to be like the most memorable thing. It just needs to assure the person reading it that you're like Benjamin said, like that you're a normal person, and that you have your like goals and reasons for wanting to go into medicine are pure. So you don't need to. This doesn't need to be like the next New York Times bestseller. It just needs to do the job.
Awesome. Thank you so much, guys. Now we're going to segue into tips for selecting your most meaningful experiences. We just kind of touched on practices, and this is the best way to kind of figure out how you can choose those experiences for your personal statement.
Sure, I can talk about this one.
Oh, sorry, was this one?
No, it's okay. Tips for selecting your most meaningful experiences. So, and I think during AMCAS, you also select your most meaningful experiences. So I think one secondary point would be to not have them overlap too much. Potentially, you don't want to repeat the same things. But when you create your personal statement, you're going to want to select, 2 or 3 major experiences in your body paragraphs that you want to really flesh out and describe, why you're interested in medicine and kind of what you want to highlight as an applicant. You don't want too many, or else you're just not going to flesh it out and it's going to come off as a CV. So kind of tips other than that would be, of course, being relevant to the medical field. Ultimately you're trying to be a doctor and go to medical school, so it wouldn't make sense to describe something irrelevant to that. 2, promoting personal or professional growth. Like we said previously, it's important to show reflection and kind of an upward trajectory in terms of personal and professional development. 3, showcase specific quality and skills that you think are important to the field of medicine, relevant to the field of medicine, whether it be research or ability to lead, as you'll be kind of a leader in terms of clinical teams. 4, in terms of describing impacting significance, you want to, like I said, select very meaningful experiences that are not necessarily cookie cutter or already described in your CV. And then 5, creating diverse experiences. So you don't want it to be all pigeonholed in research. If you're only interested in research, then maybe you should get a PhD instead of an MD. So, showcasing that you're kind of well-rounded as an applicant, whether it be clinically, if you've done a lot of volunteer work, if you're a former EMT or a nurse or whatever that is, research-wise, research is always important, et cetera. So kind of being diverse. So those are kind of some basic tips for selecting experience. But I think most importantly, it's just don't select too many. I think 2 or 3 is a good amount.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think 2 or 3 is good. And I think at least how I like to advise my students is like, I think the most important thing, like we said, is show, not tell. So rather than just like talking about the experience, sometimes that's enough. That's sufficient. If like you can really articulate what this experience meant to you and how it changed you or brought you closer to your goal of becoming a physician. But if you can tell a story that instead of like you just saying it, that shows it, like that shows that you have empathy and compassion, rather than saying that like I worked as an EMT. During my time as an EMT, I saw a lot of patients who really like were very sick or that I had to help. Like rather than kind of typing that out, like telling a story of a patient that really touched you or that was really meaningful to you. I think that is more memorable and is more humble. So I think that is something to keep in mind. And then also like just regarding the first tip, like must be relevant to the medical field. Yes, I think it must tie back to the medical field, but or tie into like how it made you or gave you a characteristic that you think will make you a strong physician. So for example, I was working with a student who was a competitive gymnast for like her whole life. She was like going to go to the Olympics and she got an injury. And so the first paragraph of her personal statement was talking about her like time doing gymnastics and her first like broken bone and how that kind of exposed her to the medical field. And then she then used like qualities that she took away from her like long career as a gymnast, like teamwork, perseverance, effort. She used her experience as a gymnast to kind of talk about and prove that she exemplifies those qualities. So I think that it doesn't have to like directly relate to the medical field as long as you tie it in at some point in your essay to the medical field.
Okay, let's discuss crafting an impactful narrative.
I can go through this one. So when you're crafting an impactful narrative, you want to start with a strong introduction. Like I said, you want to avoid starting off with like too shocking of an introduction. But if you are good with humor, I think like trying to use a little humor can be good, but not forceful. Or just starting off with like a strong statement. Like my first introduction to the medical field was this. I have students who start with like, I'm thinking of one where she said that she was always interested in medicine, and it didn't surprise her family when she told them that she wanted to go to medical school because they remembered that she would just frequently play with like a toy doctor set on their pet golden retriever. Like something that is like a little funny and a little like cute maybe, or just different. And then it can, but like keep it short and then tie you into like the crux of your statement. I think step 2, you want to like highlight your motivation. So if you had a family member that had some disease and that was what, made you interested in helping people, that's where you can talk about that. If you were motivated because you maybe like shadowed at an early age for some reason and just were in the surgery suite and were watching surgeons and it just really, you thought it was the coolest thing you've ever seen. Like you can just say that. Like, I think it's important to be honest because they're going to ask you questions from your personal statement in your interview. And if you weren't being honest, it's not going to come out as genuine. So truly like sit down and think about like why actually do I want to be a doctor, and jot ideas down and like make sure that those reasons come out in your statement. Step 3, we already talked about this a good amount, but like showcasing your relevant experiences. And like, so if you did a lot of research and you can talk about why you did that and why you really liked it and how you plan to incorporate that into your career as a physician. If you did work as an EMT or a scribe, you can talk about that and how it gave you more insight into the medical field and into like, and more helped guide your decision to become a physician. And then step 4, we've also talked about a bit, but like illustrating core qualities. So like truly think about what you think makes you strong. You can even ask like your friends and your family, like what qualities do you like when I say that I want to be a doctor, what qualities do you think of that, that you think, yeah, that makes sense. I could see this person being a doctor. And then illustrate those. And remember, instead of saying I should be a doctor because I have a lot of empathy, tell a story that shows that you are empathetic, instead of saying that you have really good communication skills or that you're really dedicated. Tell a story that shows that you're dedicated. You don't even have to use the word dedicated.
Okay, great. So step 5 would be connecting your story to medicine. So like previously stated, you can have whatever kind of experience you want to include, but it's important to tie it back. Ultimately, if you kind of leave it loose-ended and just say you had this experience, that's not going to be impactful, it's not going to be relevant, and you need to tie it back to your future and what that experience brings to you in terms of personal and professional development. 6 would be tying in long-term goals. I think this is so important and should be in your concluding paragraph. People, admissions committees, and physicians love to hear that you've thought about your future, you've thought about your goal in 5 to 10 years, and you're able to kind of actually state that and list that out. And that more often than not, whatever you say you're going to do in undergrad is not going to be the case. During medical school, I thought I was going to be a cardiac surgeon, and I'm in diagnostic and nuclear radiology. So completely different, but broad strokes, I do think I'm still on that path in terms of one of my other major long-term goals was to become a physician researcher. And I'm still doing, a lot of research. I've done a funded, dedicated research here as well during medical school. So be clear about what you're planning to do, what you're going to contribute to the field. I think admissions committees really like that. Step 7 would be being genuine, personal. These are all seasoned physicians and other people in the healthcare field that have seen, and interacted with so many different people, so many different patients, and they can absolutely, and have seen so many applications, they can absolutely see through when you're just kind of listing out something just to check it off or just say it to say it. It needs to be genuine, and it needs to be personal and be something that you can truly talk about on a personal level, I think. And 8, concluding thoughtfully. I think it's important at the end of the personal statement just to summarize everything, your journey, why you want to be a doctor, and future direction.
Yeah. And going back to like tying in long-term goals, it's okay if you don't know what you want to be yet. So don't feel pressured. Just like if you don't know, don't feel pressured to come up with something. And along those same lines, I did, like, I knew I wanted to be a psychiatrist. And so I talked a lot about like, and also my experiences just kind of flowed that way. Like I did research with the brain. I did like neuroscience major. So it kind of like fit the theme and story that I had. But at the end, I didn't say like, I will be a psychiatrist. Like that is what I definitely want to be. And I'm not interested in anything else. You don't want to pigeonhole yourself because more and more medical schools are interested in recruiting people who are interested in primary care. And so if you say like, I'm only interested in surgery, that could actually look bad or like, or backfire on you. If you are interested in surgery, you should definitely say it, but you should say it in a way of like, I look forward to exploring the field of surgery more in medical school, as well as many other fields that I haven't had the chance to do so yet. Like you want to like, yes, like everything that Benjamin said was correct. Like you want to show that you are able to think ahead and that you've thought about this and that you have passions, but you want to also show that you are open to other experiences and professions.
Okay, so let's touch on strategies for ensuring your narrative is impactful and compelling.
So I can talk about this one. So the first thing you want to do, like we kind of talked about, is start with a unique hook. I feel like I already gave some examples of this. My example was like, my parents were both neuroscientists, and I kind of like used, I forgot what the exact line was, but like, when I was younger, I would like imagine them playing Frankensteins with like rats' brains. Little did I know that like I would also major in neuroscience. Like, so something that's just like a little catchy, but like not crazy. And it was just like one line, or like the first 2 lines. But again, like you don't have to do some huge dramatic thing. 2, you want to create a coherent structure. We've talked about this. Like, I think the safest and easiest bet is to just do chronologically. Talking about, you know, anything that happened in your childhood or in high school that made you interested in medicine. And then going on to, you want to mainly focus on things that, like events that have occurred and experiences that you've had in college and afterwards. You don't want to talk too much about like high school experiences unless they were really meaningful. But so then you would go into like your college experiences, if you were pre-med, classes you liked, why you liked them, your major, if you did research in college, if like you've taken a bunch of gap years and you've done research there or worked in a clinical setting, you want to definitely then go into that and then kind of tie it all together in like your future direction. 3, this is a good one, like emphasizing your unique perspective. So I told you guys about a student that I had that was a professional athlete. Like that's a very unique thing, and unique aspect of her and of professional athletes. Like that's not every day that you have a professional athlete who's now applying to medical school. So if that's your thing, you should talk about it. And it's definitely it's going to make you unique. It's going to make you stand out. And it's going to be true to like your story and who you are. That goes the same as if you are applying with like 10 gap years, that's unique. And what if you were like a literature major? That's a very unique background and a really cool kind of view and perspective to take on medicine. So then talk about that. You want to emphasize your what makes you unique. And then 4, like this will be like the 7th time I've said it, but it really does merit that many times because it's so important. You want to show, not tell. Stories are key, in my opinion.
And just to add on that, in terms of the unique part, I think that's so important in terms of not only contributing to the diversity of the class. You know, these admissions committees are looking for people with a wide range of life experiences that can really enrich, you know, the people around you. There's so many diverse people in medicine. I remember in my med school class, there are all types of people. There are people on the standard track, just went straight through college on the standard path, were pre-med, etc. There are some people who were in consulting before, worked in China for 10 years before applying into medicine. They're former Olympians, former college athletes, etc. So you don't have to, but if you have a unique, you know, life path, I think it's good to include. And I think admissions committees definitely like that. All right, great. So I'm talking about this next, but I think we went over a lot of these, so I won't, you know, belabor the point. But you know, it's important to highlight, you know, this is your narrative, and you need to describe what you've learned and what your trajectory is going to be in terms of professional personal development. 6, I think this is really important. I think a lot of you know, it's kind of a balance in terms of showing that you're well qualified as an applicant, but you don't want to come off as arrogant or someone who's like, oh, I'm going to save the world, I'm going to be this elite doctor, or etc. Like I'm a genius researcher, etc. You want to be thoughtful about how you're conveying your experiences. So balancing your qualifications with being humble. 7, ultimately, this is why you're writing your personal statement, right? Which is to explain why medicine, why not another field, why you'd be a good fit, and how you're going to contribute to the field, essentially. And then 8, obviously, you need to start your personal statement months in advance and continue to edit and revise it through multiple iterations. I like I said, I revised mine dozens of times, especially with the flow. So that's important.
Yeah, just some other additions to this. When you're writing, you want to make sure that you're avoiding like negativity. So if you had, like, I'm thinking of examples, like I had a student who had a really, really awesome encounter with a doctor that they were shadowing. And they said something like, the doctor really sat down and took a lot of time with the patient, unlike other doctors that I've seen or had. Like, you don't want to bash other doctors, or you don't want to bash other fields. So if you're, if you're like, I think like writing prescriptions is really cool. Like, that's why I didn't want to be a PhD, or that's why I didn't want to like be a nurse. Like, you don't know who's reading this, and they might, have people they love that are those professions, and you just don't want to be a negative person, and you want to work as a team and show that you have respect for every profession. So you want to avoid being negative towards other professions or like people, or just in general. Another thing that you want to avoid is like talking about a time when you kind of like failed. There will be so many secondary questions where they'll ask you like, oh, list a time that you like made a choice that you regret and what you did to overcome it, or like name a time when you failed and what did you do about it. I understand that like something that you may resonate with you is like your perseverance. You can like depict your perseverance without talking about it, like without highlighting like something negative that you did, or like bad that like something that you did wrong. I think that's the personal statement is not the time for that. There will be times where they directly ask you about those questions later. And then as far as like editing and revising, you want to show it to as many people as you're comfortable with. Like, I sent it to many professors, anyone who was writing my letter of rec, a bunch of my friends, my mom, my sister, anyone that like you just want to get as much input as possible. And also you can take a break. So like, say that you have an idea and you sit down and you write and you're like, oh, that was pretty good. You can just like shut your laptop and like go away for a week, as long as this is early enough, and then come back to it and be like, that actually wasn't as good as I thought. Or like, oh, that actually was good. And then now I have another idea that's coming from it. Like, it's good to take breaks and revisit after some time to see if your opinion has changed. Yeah, I think that's also important.
Okay, thanks so much. That was super insightful. We've reached the Q&A section of our webinar. So if you have any questions, type them in the chat box below and we'll go ahead and answer them. We already have one from Mo. How many experiences should we mention? Would it be okay if we focus on 2 things about us and just give a meaningful story? Or do we need to highlight skills specifically rather than mentioning what we learned?
Mo, that's a great question. So, like I said, the number of experiences you include are variable. I think 2 or 3 is a good kind of baseline amount, but whatever you're comfortable with fully fleshing out and really making sure that they're contributing to your narrative. So no set amount, but I think 2 or 3 is something good to start with. You can, I think it is good to, include anecdotes or stories describing those experiences. Like we said, show, don't tell, rather than just listing those experiences. I would include, some kind of story or addressing the third part of your question, or if you took away specific skills or learned anything specific. Either one of those things is fine, as long as you took away something meaningful that contributes to your personal growth and might help you become a better physician.
Awesome. Thanks so much. Anything to add to that, Jess, or Ben summarized it well?
No, I think you summarized it really well. I think there's no like hard and fast rule. You just want to make sure that like at the end of the day, when you're reading your personal statement, you're getting what you want to get across to the reader.
Awesome.
If you can do that in one story, and what that one story touches on many different things you've learned, I think that you can tell that one story. If you want to do that in 2 or 3, I think that's fine too.
Cool. Thanks so much. I think we have a question. We have 3 questions coming from Colby. So Colby, feel free to type those in the chat box, and we'll go ahead and answer for you. We'll just wait for the questions to come in. I was wondering if you both could kind of, I know we've touched on it a little bit in the webinar, But while we wait, I was wondering if you guys could touch a little bit more about your personal statement and what made them so unique. And do you think it was kind of like the catalyst of like what helped you get into medical school?
Yeah. I personally like didn't have the strongest like MCAT score. Like I did research, but I wasn't like a research powerhouse. So I think I really credit my personal statement to getting me in the door at a lot of places. I always really liked writing and I was really good at writing. So I think that like I started off strong because of that. And I had a good story that made sense. So I think that worked really well for me. And I think that, like I said, it kind of depends on what you want to convey. Like I think my strengths are like my empathy, my communication, like my people skills. And so I was able to tell stories that showed those. This sounds kind of cliche, but I did it in a way that wasn't cliche. But like I had a patient, I was doing clinical research and I had a patient who basically like wrote me a card after thanking me for like how I handled a certain situation with him. And I was able to kind of talk about that and how that kind of changed me or like made me more decided that I wanted to go into something that brings people like joy and makes people feel better about themselves. So I think just like really strong stories is what helped me.
Awesome. I love that. Okay, looks like Colby has entered their questions. So since there's 3, well, I guess we'll just answer one at a time. So first question, in the pitfalls portion, we were warned to avoid cliches in our statements. What sorts of cliches should we avoid?
Yeah, I think we talked about this a good amount. Would be one thing I see a lot with applicants is describing, a family member who's gone through a serious illness, which can be important, but it's got to be done right because you see so many of those. So you have to be genuine about it. You can't just say my family had this illness and made me want to go into medicine. I want to save lives. I want to change the field of medicine. I think that's a big cliche that you see a lot, especially as a hook. People use that as a hook a lot in terms of why they want to go into medicine. But if you're not able to be genuine and really, flesh it out, I think that's certainly a cliche that I don't necessarily like to see in some of these personal statements.
I agree with that. Like I think if you're going to talk about like an event that happened to a family member, it should be something that really like changed the course of your future or like really made you, it should be like really impactful and you should be able to describe that. Like I see a lot of things where it's like my grandfather had Alzheimer's and which is really sad. And like, if that was impactful to you, then yes, you should mention it. But if it was just that, like that's not, doesn't really pertain to like your trajectory to medicine. Another thing, like even if you want to include something, like I included a personal story and I was fine and I thought it made me stronger. But what you want to avoid doing then if you're going to do that is being like, I couldn't save my grandfather, but I'll save the other people. You know what I mean? Like, it's just like, of course you couldn't save your grandfather. You were 12. And like, that's great to have like motivation to want to help people, but you need to be realistic. And yeah, I guess I'll leave it at that. Trying to think of like other cliches. I think like what I mentioned, like really like gruesome or like intense hooks are just a lot and don't make people want to read your story.
I think another cliche is, I see this a lot with research, and this may tie into other portions of that question that we'll talk about later, but I see a lot of people who've done, some amount of research and say they're going to develop the next cure or do this, develop this cool new thing that's going to change the field. And I think, physicians and researchers see right through that. You're higher than that's a nice ambition to have, but you got to be realistic and, you're an undergrad and sure, you may have had some cool achievements, but, you don't want to come across as, having too lofty of ambitions. And I think just comes off as cliche.
Awesome. Thanks, guys. Second question. How long should a personal statement be roughly?
About a page. So 5,300 characters. Use all of them if you can, I'd say.
Yeah, it ends up being like about a page and a little bit more. It's including spaces, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yes. And I always say like it's better to start with more and then trim. So don't worry if you have a lot, because you can trim things down a lot more than you think you can. And it will even make your paper stronger. But yeah.
Okay, and third question. How important is being involved in research for an application? From the prevalence of research in today's discussions, I take it that it is extremely important. How long should someone be involved with research for a good application if they are, for example, 1 year out from getting their Master's of Science in Biomedical Sciences?
That's a good question. I think I probably talked more about research, and it was a big part of my application. I'd say it depends on what kind of program you're looking for. Like that was previously said, some programs are looking for people interested in primary care. There's a lot of state schools that are looking for physicians who want to, be on the rural track or be primary care physicians, not necessarily researchers. But you're going to a big academic center, whether that be, Harvard, Stanford, Vanderbilt, Northwestern, some of these big places that do a lot of research. I'd say research is, pretty important. I know it certainly helped me get where I am is by doing a lot of research.
Yeah, I think it's getting more and more competitive to get into medical school, specifically like MD programs. And research does help, even if it's just like a little bit. I wasn't as research heavy as it seems like Ben was, but I did join a lab like in college my junior year, like second half of my sophomore year. And it was like not wet lab research. It was just clinical research, and it didn't take that much time. And I was able to get my name on a publication that I was able to show on my medical student application or medical school application. So that was helpful. So it's good to have, definitely. I think if you have the time, or if you're like someone who's watching this, who's still in college, I would join a lab if possible. But if you haven't yet, that's totally okay, especially if you have like other strong experiences. Like if you have a lot of clinical experience, if you did EMT, or if you did scribing, or if you worked as like a medical assistant, like that's all also really, really important. And it's also just how you phrase it. So if you phrase your application, your personal statement, in such a way that it's like you really want to work clinically, then it's going to be less important that you have research.
And then addressing the other part of that question, how long you should be involved in research. There's no set time. You can be involved with research for as little as a few months to a few years. I think what's more important is what you got out of it, whether that be personal development, specific research skills, or deliverables would be presentations, posters, abstracts, publications. I think way more heavily. Yeah.
Cool. Thanks, guys. Okay, question from Mo. This isn't really a personal statement question, but what did you take away from studying for the MCAT? How do you think we should study for it in an efficient way to basically be knowledgeable in everything?
That's a big question. Yeah, I mean, that doesn't really relate to the personal statement, so I can briefly address it. But I personally took one of the courses as well as did some self-study with exam crackers. I think ultimately, everyone studies differently. Everyone has a different baseline set of knowledge. So I think each person's different. So I can't really answer, the best way to do it, but just whatever works for you. You can, chart your progress with practice exams, etc. To kind of tailor your own study regimen.
Yeah, I think like dedicating time to it. I also did like a Princeton review course. Inspira does a course as well that is amazing, so you could sign up for that. And then I think like this, I could like spend an entire hour talking about this, so it's hard, but like I think the most important thing was practice tests. You want to do a lot of practice tests, and you want to spend a lot of time looking over each practice test.
For sure. And Mo, if you're interested, we have a couple webinars coming up about the MCAT, so stay tuned for those. Okay, question from Marvell. When you talk about a strong introduction, does it mean that we have to talk about our strengths, about what we want to do in medicine?
No, I don't think that's necessarily what that means. I think it's strong introduction can be different, whether it be with memorable / a hook, or it can just be concise in stating what you're going to be talking about. So I don't think it necessarily has to just talk about your strengths. I think it just has to kind of get across, basically kickstart your personal statement in an effective way.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think it's just like when you're learning to write an essay and you have like your topic sentence or your thesis statement. Like when in doubt, you can just say like a thesis statement. Like I've known that I want to be a doctor ever since this, and like the experiences below brought me to the realization of the type of doctor I want to be, or like further experiences in my life, including XYZ being your second, third, fourth paragraphs, confirm this decision for me. If you're at a loss, like it can be as simple as that.
Perfect. Okay, question from Labrina. What should the overall tone of writing be for a personal statement?
It depends on you. Like if you're a funny person, I think it's cool and you're able to like get humor across. I think it's cool to use like a humorous tone. If you're writing about a serious topic, I think you want to have the tone be I don't know, actually. Like, I think it should be concise, which isn't really a word used to describe tone, but like you want to basically just get your point across and seem genuine in a concise manner. I think that's like the best. I don't know if Benjamin has a better way to put it or additional.
No, like you said, I think it just depends on, the type of person you are, what story you have. You have kind of this humorous journey to medicine. It can be humorous. If you got this very serious kind of straight to the point, concise kind of story, then that can be the case too. I think mine was, pretty standard, just very concise, didn't stand out, but in a negative or necessarily positive way. So I think it's just one of those for me that showed that I was a good writer. I was concise, could deliver the message of what I want to do in medicine, what brought me to medicine, and just kind of answered all the questions.
Awesome. Thanks so much, guys. Okay, I think that's it for all of the questions that we have. I want to thank everybody for joining us today. It was a really insightful conversation, and special shout out to our panelists for leading that conversation. I know I learned a lot, and I hope you all learned a lot as well. Just want to flag again, if you do want to watch the webinar back, we'll be emailing that out to all of the attendees tomorrow. I want to wish everyone a great night. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you at the next webinar. Take care, everyone.
All right, thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Good luck.